I never thought it would come to this. I never imagined my sister Rachel would sell Grandma's beach house, the one place that held all of our childhood memories without even telling me. It's sold. Her voice rang through my phone, laced with that smug tone I knew all too well. You've got nothing left to say, Emma. It's done. I felt my pulse race as her words sank in, and all I could think about was how my whole life, my relationship with my family, had been nothing but a game for Rachel. But she didn't know the cards I'd been holding all these years. Now it was my turn. Rachel's voice echoed through the phone, smug and dripping with satisfaction, as she told me how she'd just sold Grandma's beach house. I could barely believe it. The beach house, the one place in the world that still felt like home to me, was gone. I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like a brick, and my hands started shaking as I gripped the phone tighter, trying to control the storm of emotions brewing inside me. The house had been ours, a legacy left behind by Grandma Rose, a place filled with laughter, memories, and the very essence of family. Now, it was just another property on the market, bought by someone who would never know what it meant to us. You did what? I barely managed to ask, my voice hoarse, barely rising above a whisper. The words felt like they were getting stuck in my throat, choking me. Rachel's response was casual, dismissive. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Emma. It's just a house. You've been too busy with your important career in Boston. You never even used it. Her voice was almost mocking, like she was reminding me of how insignificant my life choices were to the family, to her. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to remind her of all the sacrifices I had made. While Rachel had spent her days flitting from one glamorous event to another, I had spent years earning my place at one of the most respected law firms in Boston. I had been working nonstop to carve out my own identity, separate from the expectations that had been thrust on me since childhood. But none of that mattered to Rachel. To her, I was just the distant sister who had left for a better life, leaving behind the family and, apparently, everything that came with it. And I'm the one who's been paying the price for it, right? I snapped, my hands now trembling with anger. I could already hear her little laugh on the other end of the line. She had always been the golden child, the one who got the attention, the one who didn't have to try. Rachel always got what she wanted. She had always been the favorite. I was the one who had to fight for everything: my place in the family, my recognition, my career. But Rachel, she was effortlessly the center of attention. Everything came to her easily. That's how it had always been. She had been the perfect granddaughter, the one who fit the mold our parents had created for her. She played the part of the dutiful daughter, always eager to please, always giving our father exactly what he wanted. Meanwhile, I was the rebel, the one who couldn't quite live up to their expectations. I chose a career in law over following in our father's footsteps in his company. I chose a path that led me away from home, away from them. But Rachel, she was the one who was always close. She stayed, worked at Dad's company, married the right man, David, the charming but lazy rich guy who had done absolutely nothing for himself but live off his connections. They'd been married for years, both of them living off the family's wealth, their success a result of the easy handouts they got from our parents. I had always been the outsider in this carefully constructed world, but somehow, despite all of Rachel's advantages, I still felt more entitled to Grandma's beach house. It had always been a part of me, just as much as it had been a part of her. I'm the one who's always been there, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I was the one who spent summers there with Grandma, the one who actually used the house, who held on to all those memories. Rachel didn't answer immediately, and for a moment, I thought she might actually understand. Then she burst into laughter. Oh, Emma, please, stop acting like you're the only one who cared. I'm the one who's been taking care of everything after Grandma passed. You disappeared to Boston like you always do, so don't pretend like this is your problem." I felt like she slapped me, each word stinging harder than the last. Rachel always had this way of making me feel guilty. She had done it my entire life, always reminding me that I wasn't there when they needed me, always making me feel like my career choices, my ambition, and my need to escape had somehow made me the villain in this family. "Grandma left that house to both of us," I said through gritted teeth. "You can't just sell it without my consent, Rachel. You don't have the right." "Actually, I do," she cut in, sounding almost bored. "I'm the executive of Grandma's estate. I have full authority over what happens with her property. You should have shown up to more estate meetings if you cared so much." She dropped the bomb like it was nothing, like I hadn't been working tirelessly to build my career in Boston. Like my life, my choices, my dedication didn't matter. I stood still in my kitchen, fighting the urge to throw the phone against the wall. I wanted to scream, to let her know how unfair this all was. But I knew better. Yelling wouldn't get me anywhere. Rachel had always gotten what she wanted. But now I had something she didn't. I had a plan. "Fine," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my chest was tight with fury. "I'll fight this. I won't let you get away with this." Rachel's laugh echoed again. "With what? Your fancy law degree? Face it, Emma. You lost. I won. The house is sold, and the money's already in the bank. It's done." The call ended with a click, and I was left standing in my kitchen, feeling the weight of everything come crashing down. But I wasn't going to let Rachel have the last word. I had spent enough years watching from the sidelines, waiting for my turn. This was it. I was done being overlooked, done being dismissed. Grandma Rose had always said to think 5 steps ahead, to be prepared for anything. And I realized now, as I stood there staring at my empty kitchen, that Grandma's foresight was what I needed to rely on. I wasn't going to lose, not this time. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone again, dialing a number I hadn't called in years. "Thomas Harrison, Grandma's lawyer." "Thomas, I need your help," I said, my voice steady now, the determination flowing through me. "Rachel sold the house, but I'm going to make sure she regrets it." And so the game began. I couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency building in my chest. The sale of the beach house was more than just a personal loss, it was a wake-up call. The betrayal had come too easily for Rachel, like she'd been planning this for months, maybe even years. As I sat at my kitchen table, the echo of her smug voice still ringing in my ears, I knew I had to take action. This wasn't just about the house, it was about reclaiming my place in the family. I was done being the invisible sister, the one who always got overlooked. I had always been the serious one, the one who followed the rules and worked hard for everything I had. Rachel, on the other hand, had always been the spoiled one, the one who had everything handed to her. But I wasn't going to let her take what was rightfully mine, what was rightfully ours. Grandma had trusted both of us with that house, and Rachel had sold it out from under me without a second thought. That wasn't just a betrayal, it was a violation of everything Grandma stood for. The first thing I did was call Thomas Harrison. He was Grandma's lawyer for over 30 years and knew her inside and out. He was the one person I trusted to help me navigate this mess. As a lawyer myself, I knew I had the tools to fight back, but I needed someone who knew the family's legal history, someone who knew exactly what Grandma had planned. When Thomas answered, I could hear the familiar rustle of papers in the background. It was as if he had been waiting for my call. "Emma," he said, his voice warm but serious, "I've been expecting you." "I don't know what to do, Thomas," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to remain calm. "Rachel sold the beach house without my permission. She says as executor, She had the right, but I know Grandma never would have allowed this. Not like this. Not without both of us agreeing. I see, Thomas said, his tone shifting. Emma, you've got to understand. Your grandmother always had a plan. She knew exactly what Rachel was capable of, and she made sure that nothing would be done without your consent. I took a shaky breath, trying to calm myself. What are you saying? What did Grandma do? I'll explain everything when you get here, Thomas said. You need to meet me in Newport this afternoon. It's important. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat, grabbed my purse, and locked up my apartment. I didn't even think twice. I had to know what Grandma had left me, what she had known was coming. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let Rachel steal what was rightfully mine. The beach house wasn't just some piece of property, it was a legacy. It was a piece of my childhood. It was a symbol of everything that mattered. The train ride to Newport felt like an eternity. My mind kept drifting back to memories of summers, spent with Grandma at the beach house. The scent of the salt water in the air, the sound of her laughter as we sat on the wraparound porch, the countless hours we spent talking about life, about the future. I could hear her voice in my head, telling me to always think ahead. You have to anticipate, dear. Not just the next move, but the next 5, she used to say. I'd always thought she was being overly cautious, but now I understood. She had known exactly what she was doing. She had anticipated everything, including Rachel's greed. When I arrived at Thomas's office, he was waiting for me. His sharp eyes studied me as I approached, and for a moment, I could see the same steady, unwavering look that had always been there. The look Grandma had trusted. You look just like her, Thomas said, his voice softening. Rose would be proud. I smiled faintly. Rachel wouldn't agree. Rachel sees what Rachel wants, Thomas said with a hint of bitterness in his voice. But your grandmother understood ambition. She built her empire from nothing. She knew what it meant to work for everything. And she knew that, sometimes, you have to take precautions when it comes to family. Precautions? I repeated, confused. Thomas gestured for me to sit, and then he got straight to the point. Emma, the key you wear. Have you ever tried using it? I glanced down at the small silver key on the chain around my neck. It had been Grandma's, and she had insisted I keep it after she passed. At the time, I had no idea why. She had never explained. No, I said, shaking my head. Why would I? It's just a key. Thomas's eyes gleamed. Your grandmother wasn't one for mysteries. She was always thinking ahead. She knew Rachel might try something like this, and she made sure there was a fail-safe in place. That key, Emma, it opens something important, and I think you're about to find out why. I felt a knot form in my stomach as Thomas pulled out a thick file from his desk drawer and slid it across to me. This is the deed Rachel used to sell the beach house, he said. It's not the final version, though. 2 weeks before Grandma passed, she filed an amended deed, one with very specific conditions about the sale and ownership. I froze, my fingers hovering over the papers. What conditions? Thomas smiled, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. Rachel doesn't know about them. Grandma amended the deed because she knew Rachel well. The house could only be sold if both of you agreed. Any unauthorized sale would trigger something Grandma called the character clause. I could feel my heart rate pick up. Character clause? What's that? Emma, Thomas said, his voice steady. The ownership of the beach house would immediately transfer to the wronged party if Rachel tried to sell it without your consent. The words hit me like a thunderclap. My grandmother had thought of everything. She had anticipated Rachel's every move and had made sure I was protected. I could hardly believe it. I had been left with the power to undo everything Rachel had done. Thomas's eyes twinkled. Rachel is about to learn a very valuable lesson. I grabbed the documents and stood up. Let's go. I need to see this for myself. We drove to the beach house, and as soon as I stepped inside, the familiar scent of old wood and salt water filled my lungs. It was as if nothing had changed. Rachel had never cared about this place. She didn't know it the way I did. She had sold it without ever truly understanding its significance. I unlocked the study, the key sliding smoothly into the hidden safe Grandma had entrusted me with. Inside, I found a thick envelope with my name written in Grandma's elegant handwriting. The note on the front read, "For Emma when Rachel shows her true colors." My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope, each page I read revealing the truth about Rachel's betrayal. Grandma had known. She had planned for this, and now it was time for Rachel to face the consequences. The air in the conference room felt thick, and I could practically taste the tension as I stood at the front, ready to confront Rachel. I had everything I needed: proof of Grandma's foresight, the documents that would expose Rachel's greed, and most importantly, the knowledge that I had the upper hand. It was time for the truth to come out. I was done being the silent, overlooked sister. Today, I would take back what was mine. Rachel entered with her usual pomp, head held high, her designer clothes swishing with each step, her latest Hermes bag clutched in one hand, and her heels clicking loudly against the floor. She almost looked like she was walking into a fashion show, instead of a confrontation over the family inheritance. Behind her, David followed with that smug look of someone who had gotten away with something. But I was no longer intimidated. This time, I was the one in control. "Emma," Rachel greeted me, her tone dripping with faux sweetness. "You look so serious. I guess that's your way of handling this, huh?" I didn't answer right away, just silently motioning for her to sit down. Thomas was already seated, his sharp eyes scanning the situation. I could tell he was enjoying watching Rachel squirm, though he kept a professional demeanor. I'd known Thomas for years, and I could feel the weight of Grandma's legacy behind his actions. Rachel plopped herself down dramatically, flipping her hair over her shoulder as if she were still in charge of the room. Her lawyer stood beside her, looking slightly out of place, like he wasn't sure if he was in the middle of a legal battle or a reality show. "You might want to sit down, Rachel," I said calmly, my voice carrying the weight of everything that had led up to this moment. "This is important." "Important?" she scoffed. "Please, Emma, I don't know what game you're playing, but you're really wasting everyone's time. You can't just take control of everything because you feel slighted." I smiled faintly. "Actually, Rachel, that's exactly what I'm going to do." I pushed the documents forward, one by one. "Let's talk about the beach house sale you executed without my consent," I said, my voice unwavering. "You think I don't know what happened, but I've done my homework." Rachel leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "We've been through this. I had every right as the executor of the estate. The house wasn't being used, and it was just sitting there. It was a good deal. Get over it." I almost couldn't believe her audacity, the nerve she had, sitting there and acting like it was nothing more than a transaction. But I wasn't about to let her off the hook this time. I pulled out the amended deed, the one Grandma had secretly filed just weeks before she passed. "Not so fast," I said. "This is the final version of the deed. You had the preliminary one, the one you used to sell the house." Rachel's face twitched. "That's not—" "I think it is," I interrupted, flipping open the document. "According to Grandma's final wishes, the beach house could only be sold with unanimous agreement from both of us. You can't just sell it without my consent. And, according to the terms of this deed, any unauthorized sale triggers what Grandma called the character clause." Rachel froze. "Character clause?" she whispered, her voice suddenly shaky. I could see the realization dawning on her face. She had no idea Grandma had set this up. She had thought she was untouchable, that her position as executor gave her all the power. But Grandma had always been 5 steps ahead. And now Rachel was realizing she had walked into a trap of her own making. I leaned forward, my voice steady. In the event that one granddaughter attempted to sell the property without the other's consent, ownership immediately and irrevocably transfers to the wronged party. That means the beach house is now mine. There was a long silence. Rachel's jaw tightened, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how to wriggle out of this. But it was too late. I had her. She stood up, her eyes blazing with fury. This is ridiculous. I did what I thought was best for the family. I did what Grandma would have wanted. I could feel my anger rising, but I kept it in check. You did what you thought was best for yourself. You didn't care about what Grandma wanted. You just saw an opportunity to line your pockets, and you took it. But it's over, Rachel. Grandma made sure of that. Rachel turned to her lawyer. Can't she do something about this? She asked, her voice sharp. The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. This document is pretty ironclad. I'd need to review everything in detail, but it doesn't look good for you. I couldn't help the smirk that tugged at the corner of my lips. The look on Rachel's face was priceless. She had spent so long acting like she was in control, like she was the one who called the shots. And now, all of that was slipping through her fingers, but the moment of triumph was short-lived. I wasn't finished yet. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out the final document from Grandma's safe. It was a letter sealed with Grandma's wax insignia, addressed to Rachel. I held it up, watching Rachel's face pale. Grandma didn't just plan for the beach house, Rachel. She planned for everything. This letter is for you. Rachel's hands shook as she reached for it, her smug demeanor cracking. She opened the letter slowly, her eyes scanning the page. I watched as her expression morphed from anger to confusion to something far worse, fear. The room was silent except for the sound of her trembling voice as she read aloud. My dearest Rachel, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have been realized. Her voice faltered. She stopped reading and looked at me, her eyes wide. This isn't right, she whispered. Oh, it's right, I said softly. Grandma knew exactly who you were, Rachel. She knew what you were capable of. And now you have to face the consequences of your actions. Rachel crumpled the letter in her fist, her composure completely gone now. This isn't fair, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I was the good granddaughter. I didn't have to say anything. The truth was out. She had played the part, but she had never truly understood what Grandma valued. Rachel had been chasing status and wealth, while Grandma had valued family, integrity, and loyalty above all else. I stood up, gathering the documents and pushing them toward Rachel. You lost your chance to be in charge of the estate. You'll have to give up everything you've gained through manipulation. I'll be taking over from here. Rachel's lawyer stood up too, finally speaking up. You can't just take everything from her like this, he said, his voice shaking. There are legal procedures. Thomas cut him off. Rachel's actions have already voided any claim she has to the estate. It's over. The door to the conference room opened, and I saw the shock on Rachel's face as she registered. What had just happened? This wasn't a business deal. This was a lesson Grandma had ensured she would learn the hard way. I stood tall, feeling the weight of everything I had fought for my family, my legacy, and my place in the world. As I watched Rachel's face twist in disbelief, I could feel the satisfaction building inside me, but I wasn't finished yet. This had gone on long enough, too long, in fact. I had played the part of the invisible sister for years, silently enduring Rachel's favoritism, her arrogance, and her manipulations. But now, with the truth finally laid out before her, I couldn't let it go. It was time to expose everything. Rachel's lawyer was fumbling through the documents I had pushed across the table. She still hadn't fully grasped what was happening, and I knew she was desperately trying to find a way out. This can't be happening, she muttered under her breath. You can't just take this from me. But I had already taken it. This was never about the house or the money. It was about restoring balance, taking back what was rightfully mine, and showing Rachel and my family what real integrity looked like. You should have thought of that before you sold our family's beach house behind my back, I said coolly. Grandma made sure there were safeguards in place for a reason. You tried to skip over them, Rachel, and now you're paying the price. I stood up, walking to the window and looking out at the city skyline. The weight of what I was doing still hadn't fully hit me. I had spent my entire life proving my worth to a family that had never valued me. But now, with this one act, I had taken back my dignity. I had restored what Grandma had worked so hard to build. Emma, Rachel said, her voice shaking with anger, you're ruining everything. This was our family's legacy. You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a greedy, vindictive little girl who's trying to get revenge. Her words stung, but I refused to let her see how deeply they affected me. Rachel had always had a way of twisting everything, making it seem like she was the victim, when in reality, she was the one who had manipulated the situation for her benefit. But now the tables had turned, and I was finally going to make her face the consequences of her actions. Greed has nothing to do with this, I said, turning back to face her. This is about family, about loyalty, about doing what's right, not what's easy. What you did was a betrayal, Rachel, and now you'll have to face it. Rachel's face was pale, her lips trembling as she glanced at her lawyer. What are you going to do now? She asked, her voice faltering. Are you going to take everything from me? My reputation? My career? I could see the fear in her eyes, the panic that had slowly begun to settle in. She wasn't used to losing control, and for the first time in her life, she was powerless. I leaned forward, my voice steady and calm. You've already lost everything, Rachel. You just don't know it yet. Her eyes narrowed. You can't prove anything. You're just a lawyer with a fancy degree. What do you think the board is going to do? They'll back me. I'm the one who's been running this estate. They know I'm the right choice. I shook my head. You still don't get it, do you? The board doesn't care about you, Rachel. They never did. They've been watching you ruin everything for years. And now that I've taken control, they're on my side. You're out of the picture. For good. Rachel's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of vulnerability. But just as quickly, she recovered, her eyes flashing with anger again. You think you've won? You think you've beaten me? She sneered. You don't know what you're up against. I'll fight this. I'll take you to court. I'll make sure you lose everything. Her words were empty, hollow threats. I had been through it all before courtrooms, legal battles, the feeling of being on the edge, with nothing but my resolve to hold on to. But now, I wasn't fighting alone. I had the truth on my side, and I was ready to see this through. I don't need to fight you in court, Rachel, I said, my voice cold and decisive. You've already lost. The documents are in place. The board has already made their decision. All that's left is for you to accept it. Rachel didn't respond right away. She just stood there, her hands shaking as she stared at the table, trying to figure out her next move. She had always been the one who thrived on manipulation, on getting others to do her bidding. But now, there was no one left to manipulate. She was facing the consequences of her actions, and it was finally sinking in. I pulled out the final piece of evidence, the letter Grandma had left for Rachel. I had read it in the privacy of my own office, but now I was ready to share it with her. I pushed the letter across the table, watching as Rachel hesitated before picking it up. Read it, I said simply. This is the letter Grandma wrote for you. After everything you've done, I think you owe it to her to hear what she had to say. Rachel's hand trembled as she opened the envelope, her eyes scanning the words. The silence in the room was suffocating. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, She looked up, her face pale. She knew? She whispered, barely able to speak. I nodded. She always knew, Rachel. She knew who you were, and she knew what you were capable of. But she also knew that one day you would learn the hard way. This is that day. Rachel's expression crumpled, the pride she had carried for so long shattering before my eyes. She looked defeated, broken, and for the first time I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. Maybe there was a chance for her to change, to make things right. But I wasn't about to let her off the hook. Not yet. Your actions have consequences, I said firmly. And now you're going to face them. You'll step down from the estate. You'll return the money you took. And you'll work with me to restore Grandma's legacy. Rachel opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. If you don't, I'll make sure you face legal consequences. The choice is yours. For a long moment, there was only silence. Finally, Rachel stood up, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I'll do it, she said quietly. I'll make it right. The words didn't come with conviction. They came with resignation. But at least, for the first time, I saw that she was willing to take responsibility. I hope you mean that, I said, my voice softening slightly, because this isn't just about the estate. It's about rebuilding our family, and that starts with you. I walked out of the room, leaving Rachel to her thoughts. It wasn't over yet, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control of my own future. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, paperwork, and negotiation. But as I stood in Grandma's restored beach house, looking out over the ocean, I knew one thing for sure. This was my legacy, and it was worth fighting for. Ban, annoy, deploy the main idea 5800, 900 words ChatGPT annoy. As I stood there, watching the waves crash against the rocks beneath the pier, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. The beach house was no longer just a piece of property. It had become a symbol of something far more important. For years, it had been Rachel's to manipulate, to use as a bargaining chip for her own gain. But now, it was mine, and with it came not just control over the estate, but a responsibility to make sure the lessons Grandma had left for us didn't go unlearned. I turned back to the house, still in the process of being restored. The roof had been repaired, the garden was slowly returning to its former glory, and the paint on the walls had freshened up, though it would take time before everything was truly back to its former charm. But as I stood there, I couldn't help but feel that this was more than just a renovation project. This was the start of something bigger, a fresh beginning for my family. Rachel, meanwhile, had disappeared into the background. For a while, it seemed like she would fight me on every turn. But after the board voted in my favor, after the estate had been restructured, and after everything was on the table, she had nowhere to hide. The truth had finally caught up with her. I thought back to the last conversation. We had the one in which she finally admitted the truth, admitted how deep the mess really was. I could still hear her voice shaking as she confessed to embezzling from the estate. The money she took wasn't just for a new yacht or a lavish shopping spree. It was to cover up David's disastrous real estate investments. Rachel, desperate to keep up appearances, had sacrificed everything for a fleeting sense of security. But that was before. Now, things were different. Now, Rachel was working with me, doing her best to restore the beach house. The same beach house she had once thought of as nothing more than a commodity to be sold off for personal gain. It wasn't easy. Every step we took forward, there was a part of me that questioned if I was doing the right thing. Could Rachel really change? Could she truly redeem herself in my eyes? In Grandma's eyes? Could I truly forgive her for what she'd done? The answer, I realized, was simple. It didn't matter. What mattered was what we did next. What mattered was that we had a choice. We could either let the past continue to hold us hostage, or we could use the lessons. Grandma had taught us to create something better, something stronger. It wasn't just about fixing the beach house, it was about fixing the bond between Rachel and me, a bond that had been fractured for so long. It was about healing not just for the estate, but for our family and for ourselves. I glanced at my watch, noticing that I was due for another meeting with Thomas. There were still legal matters to finalize. The funds Rachel had misused had to be returned, and the estate was still in need of restructuring. But the hardest part was behind us. The hardest part had been learning to trust again, to believe that the changes we were making weren't just superficial, but deeply meaningful. Rachel, to my surprise, had thrown herself into the restoration project with more enthusiasm than I expected. It wasn't just the garden that had blossomed under her care, but her attitude too. She was working long hours, cleaning up the overgrown vines that had strangled Grandma's roses, trimming the hedges that had grown wild. For the first time, I saw her dedication to something other than herself, something bigger than her desire for status. But even as I watched her work beside me, I couldn't help but remember the endless manipulations, the lies, and the betrayal. And yet, there was something different about Rachel now. She wasn't the same person who had sold our family's house for a quick profit. There was a vulnerability in her that I hadn't seen before. For the first time, I understood the weight of her actions, and for the first time, I realized just how much she regretted them. One afternoon, as we sat on the newly repaired porch, Rachel looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "I've been a terrible sister," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I lost sight of what really mattered. I put down my gardening gloves and looked at her. "We all make mistakes," I said softly. "The important thing is what we do after." Rachel nodded, the words barely escaping her lips. "I'm sorry, Emma, for everything." I reached over and squeezed her hand. It wasn't an easy apology to make, and it wasn't easy for me to accept, but I knew this was the first step toward healing. We still had a long way to go, but it was a start. By the time winter arrived, the beach house was almost fully restored. The last of the renovations had been completed, and the garden was thriving once again, just as Grandma had always imagined. But even more importantly, Rachel and I had started to rebuild our relationship. We spent weekends working together, not just on the house, but on our bond. We talked about everything: our childhood, our mistakes, our hopes for the future. It was slow, but it was progress. And then, just as things were starting to feel like they could really be fixed, the final twist came. It came in the form of a letter, one that had been hidden away in the deepest corner of the house, forgotten until that moment. It was a letter from Grandma, addressed to both Rachel and me. Her handwriting was unmistakable, the careful, looping script that had been part of my childhood. "I knew, my dears," the letter began. "I knew that one day you would both have to face the consequences of your choices. But I also knew that you would be stronger for it, that you would come out on the other side better, wiser, and more capable of understanding what really matters. Emma, you have always had the strength to make the hard decisions. Rachel, you have the capacity to change if you choose to." I sat there for a long moment, reading the words over and over again. It was a reminder of everything Grandma had known, everything she had planned for. It was also a reminder of why I had fought so hard to preserve the legacy she left behind. I turned to Rachel, who was sitting beside me, her face pale. "We did it, Rachel," I said softly. "We fixed what was broken." Rachel nodded, tears in her eyes. "I never thought it would be this hard, but I'm glad it is. I'm glad we're finally getting it right." For the first time in years, I truly believed that Rachel and I were on the same path. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. Grandma's beach house wasn't just restored, it had been reborn, and so had our family. As I reflect on everything that's happened, it's clear that true growth isn't always about success or wealth, it's about integrity, responsibility, and the ability to learn from mistakes. Grandma always taught us that family and values come first, and that's something I've come to appreciate more than ever. It wasn't easy to fight for what was right, to confront betrayal and loss, but in the end, it was worth it. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the most meaningful victories. Family isn't perfect, but it's worth fighting for, and change is always possible if we're willing to do the work. If you've ever faced betrayal within your family, or had to fight for what's rightfully yours, I'd love to hear your story. Please share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Family Drama Stories from Reddit for more emotional stories like this.